morning, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming this morning. We're here in observance of 9/11. We appreciate you taking your time to honor those who went before us. First, I'd like to recognize some of those who are up here with us this morning. We have Colonel Scott Halter from Fort Detrick. We have Chip Jewell from Fire Services. We got Army Chaplain Anthony Taylor Sr. from Fort Detrick. Frederick Police Department Chaplain Doug Jones. And we have Chief Tom Owens from the Fire Department. With that, I would like to just now please present the colors. Frederick Police Department Chaplain Doug Jones.
Please join your hearts with me in prayer. Dear God, how do we pray for what was lost? We cannot pray for the deliverance of a miracle, for the tragedy has already burned itself into our souls. Children have grown up without parents. Families are long since bereaved. We know that there is no prayer to change the past, so we pray to live with the memory, with constant love, with the promise both to combat evil and to cherish goodness. Do not let our pain cloud our hopes or crush our hearts. Help us grow through this tragedy, keep faith with its victims, and always sustain our trust in you. And let all the people of God say, amen.
Our national anthem will be sung by Miss Jenny Benson.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Army Chaplain Anthony Taylor Sr.
Let us pledge allegiance to our flag together. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please retire the colors. Thank you. Can we give a nice round of applause for the Frederick Police Department Color Guard? Sorry, it's a little hard to see with the sun up here, so I'm tilting my hat so I can't see when I'm reading. Again, thank you all very much for coming. At this time, I'd like to recognize some distinguished guests that we have with us. From the city of Frederick, we have Alderman Kelly Russell and Alderman Michael O'Connor. County Executive Jan Gardner. County Council President Bud Otis. County Council Member Jessica Fitzwater. Also at this time, I'd like to recognize and give a big round of applause for all of the first responders that are here today and those that are still serving us today out in the streets. I think I covered everybody. On Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, the East Coast was experiencing similar weather as we have here today. People were setting about to do what they do every day, heading off to work, heading off to school, getting settled in their offices to start the day, getting on flights for businesses or personal travel. But at 8:45 a.m. on that clear Tuesday morning, that typical day changed, not only that day, but every day up until now. On that day, over 3,000 people were killed during the attacks in New York City, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., including 411 firefighters and police officers. For 16 years, we have come together to honor, thank, and praise and remember the people, the bravery, the loss, and the stories of a day that is forever embedded in our minds. We come here to remember the innocent lives lost that day, to remember how many families were torn apart, to remember the confusion we felt regarding an attack on American soil. We also come here today to remember the unsung heroes of that day, the everyday people that answered a call to help, like the boaters of New York City that evacuated 500,000 people from the island of Manhattan in less than 9 hours, the Marines that rescued toddlers from the Pentagon daycare center and formed a protective ring around the children as they were brought to safety, the brave citizens on United Airlines Flight 93 who attempted to take control away from the terrorists. We also come here today to remember and honor the first responders and the courage they displayed in their actions. They are the ones who run towards danger to help those in need. We thank them for what they did that September day and what they do to protect us every single day. We also come here today to remember how we, as Americans, came together in a true spirit of unity, prayer, and patriotism for our country. Together, we have turned the anniversary of this fateful day into an opportunity to pay tribute and to pay it forward in a positive and respectful way. It is important we never forget and that future generations will always know what Americans experienced on September 11th, 2001. Now I'd like to invite Colonel Halter to come up and say a few words.
Good morning, Mayor McClement, County Executive Gardner, and many other distinguished guests and members of this community. First, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to be here today. And I'd like to say up front, I'm a new member to this community. Before I moved here a few months ago, I did a lot of reading, and I lost count of the number of articles that had this town and county on its top 10 list. And so I had some pretty high expectations, and I tell you, over the past 4 months, you've exceeded my expectations. This truly is an incredible and wonderful community to be a part of. And I'd say, hands down, for my 21 years of experience in the Army, this is the best Army town in America, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I do thank you for inviting myself and others from Fort Detrick and our community to recognize the lives lost on 9/11 and reflect how much has changed since then and how strong and enduring the American people are. 9/11 changed more than the skyline of New York City and the National Capital Region. The attacks changed generations of Americans, our Army, and our world. That day's destruction and devastation did not condemn our nation to a future filled with fear. This loss, as profound as it was, did not break the soul of our nation. It made us stronger. That day fortified Americans with pride and patriotism and created a spirit of service in the hearts of a new generation. That day fundamentally changed our nation and our Army. This Army has become more versatile and adaptive to a changing and volatile world. We've changed so much since that September day and over the past 16 years. For the first time, we engaged in an enduring conflict with an all-volunteer Army. These volunteers wanted to be something greater than themselves, and they have done just that. Many were just in grade school 16 years ago as they watched the wars unfold in Iraq and Afghanistan. They joined our ranks knowing they could be sent into harm's way. They wanted to honor this nation with their willing service and sacrifice, and by signing their names to join the Army, they became authors of history. Their actions etched new chapters on American history on ancient places like Mosul and Fallujah, Korangal, and Kandahar. In the last 16 years, 1.3 million men and women have deployed, and nearly 7,000 service members and civilians have died in these conflicts. 60,000 have returned home wounded or injured, and their profound sacrifice cast a heavy shadow cast by the brilliant light of their uncommon courage and valor. Over the past 16 years, the Army alone has awarded 16,000 awards for valor. Of those, more than 600 Silver Stars, 30 Distinguished Service Crosses, and 17 Medals of Honor. Now this all-volunteer force faces more changes, and I'm confident the nation, its people, and its Army will grow stronger still. The world is growing more complicated, and the Army will face a wider range of global challenges, such as the slowdown in the global economy, increasing competition for scarce natural resources, influence of extremist groups, and rogue regimes. But with all these changes, one thing will never change, and that's our Army, that it's about people. Its people, the soldiers, and Army civilians. We're not about equipment, we're not about things, we're about people, and we stand together. We stand beside our soldiers, civilians, and their families. We stand beside our wounded warriors as they heal and adapt to a life changed by wounds, injuries, or illness. And we stand beside the families who grieve loved ones lost, who gave the last full measure for their nation. Finally, we stand beside our communities. We know that most of what we do is not possible without the support of our communities like Frederick and the drive that they have to help us succeed. With that, let me close by saying that while our Army is important to our national security, just as important are our firefighters, police, first responders, city and county employees, and all those who volunteer to serve our communities. It is the combination of efforts by all public servants that make the community of Frederick and America a great place, and I salute each of you. Together, we'll continue the long tradition of answering our nation's call. Thank you. May God bless Frederick and our great nation.
Thank you, Colonel. Next, I'd like to invite Chief Tom Owens to come up and say some words.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Apologize for my voice here a little bit. I've been fighting a little bit of a bug. From my perspective, it just really remains hard to believe that 16 years have passed already since that fateful date of 9/11/2001. For those of us in emergency services, many that were engaged in the response to New York, the Pentagon, and to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the events of that day will always be a part of us. And unfortunately, in many communities around the country, these types of ceremonies are no longer held. And in many cases, this memory is starting to fade. I'm very proud of both the City of Frederick and Frederick County that they continue to pause to reflect and honor the memories of those we lost. I thank Mayor McClement for continuing to recognize Patriot Day in the City of Frederick, and County Executive Gardner, who will lead a remembrance ceremony for the county at noon today. Our fire rescue, law enforcement, emergency management, and military personnel greatly appreciate the impact that this day has not been lost on this community. We must also recognize that 16 years later, the loss of life from the 9/11 attacks continues. As we stand here today, more than 5,400 cases of cancer have been linked to the toxic dust from the collapse of the World Trade Center towers. 10 to 15 new cases a week are being diagnosed from among the 75,000 responders and survivors that are being monitored by health officials on a continuing basis. As of this anniversary, 159 additional New York City firefighters have died from cancer connected to their response to the Trade Center. We often hear that 343 number as the number of firefighters that died from the World Trade Center attack, and that number certainly is true as it relates to the events of that specific day. But as we stand here today, the true number is 502 members of the New York City Fire Department that have lost their lives directly related and connected to the events of 9/11/2001. And unfortunately, that count will continue to rise. So while this is a day to certainly remember those we have lost, in closing, I would also ask that each of us say a prayer for those that continue to battle the cancer, the ones that have been diagnosed, some 5,400, that are in various stages of treatment, in hopes that we can beat this very odd cancer that has manifested itself in so many different ways among so many different people. Please keep them in your thoughts and in your prayers so that this loss of life will come to an end. Mayor, thank you again for all you have done in taking your time to make sure that we remember our fallen.
Thank you, Chief. And now I'd like to ask Lieutenant Clark Pennington to come up and say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning, and it is a true honor to be here today and to join you as we all remember the victims, their families, and the first responders who lost their lives in the terror attacks of September 11, 2001. That day forever changed our lives and the mission of our military and first responders. Like most of you, I remember the moment I learned about the first plane striking the World Trade Center, and then we watched in fear and with a sense of anguish when just 18 minutes later the second plane struck the Twin Towers again. As more and more information was released to us, next about the attack on the Pentagon, and then the thwarted hijacking of the Flight 93, our fear turned to anger and then to conviction that America would overcome and we would vow to never allow this to happen again. In all, 2,974 victims were killed during the initial attack. That includes the 343 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers. The death toll continued to grow. We've since lost another 1,400 first responders in work-related illness and injuries received during rescue and recovery operations. We never knew the damage that change that just 4 planes could have on our future. Since that day, we've seen a change in our security measures for travel, sporting events, and festivals. Firefighters and police officers had to change and adjust our training to include mass casualty treatments and investigations in response to terrorist activities, things that were foreign to us prior to that day. As early as just minutes after the first declaration of the terror attack of September 11, the concern in every city across America and this country was assessing what other targets terrorists might hit. Police departments worked around the clock to develop lists of vulnerable, high-value targets, and ways to protect them. In Frederick, that included such assets as water treatment plants, Fort Detrick, and possible disruption of government activities. What has never changed is the commitment and desire of our first responders to work together with our federal, state, and local partners. Today, we remember the victims of 9/11, honor the commitment of the first responders who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and show support to the families. This day will never be forgotten, and I thank you for the opportunity to join you in remembering and honoring those who lost their lives in 9/11. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And now, our City Hall bells will ring 4 times in memory of Flight 11, which crashed into the first tower of the World Trade Center, Flight 175, that crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center, Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and Flight 93, which crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Now I'd like to ask Miss Jenny Benson to come up and sing God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Jenny. Now I'd like to ask Colonel Halter, Lieutenant Pennington, and Chief Owens to join me over here for a second. For proclamation, September 11th, Patriot Day, a national day of service and remembrance. Whereas September 11th, 2017 marks the 16th anniversary of the unprovoked and horrific terrorist attacks on our homeland that resulted in the loss of nearly 3,000 citizens of the United States of America. We will always remember the men and women who perished as a result of those attacks and share the sorrow of their families and loved ones. We honor the bravery and courage of our civilian first responders and emergency personnel who gave their all to save others, for their selflessness, compassion, and courageous actions which strengthened our nation's unity, focus, and resolve. We remember the countless men and women of our armed forces who made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedom and security. We give thanks for those brave members of our armed forces who continue to fight against radicalism at home and abroad. On this somber day, we remember all those who wish our nation harm, that we stand united as one nation under God, vigilant in our fight against terrorism and determined to continue as an example of hope and freedom for people everywhere. Now, therefore, I, Randy McClement, Mayor of the City of Frederick, in the great state of Maryland, do hereby proclaim September 11th, 2017 as Patriot Day and a national day of service and remembrance in honor of the innocent individuals who lost their lives as a result of terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001, and in honor of the servicemen and women and first responders who protect us every day, and ask all to join with me in prayer, charity, and remembrance of our freedoms and the sacrifices made by many to ensure those freedoms continue every day. Signed by myself on behalf of the Board of Aldermen and the citizens of the City of Frederick. I would like to present these to Chief Owens, Colonel Halter, and Lieutenant Pennington. Thank you all very much. Again, thank you all very much for attending. Thank you very much to all the first responders that are here today, those who couldn't be with us because they're doing what they do every day, protecting us here in the City of Frederick and in Frederick County. I appreciate you taking your time. And again, whatever you can do to help remember those and carry that moment forward, to remember it forever, pass it along so that we do not forget. And we can do that in many, many ways. Thank you all for attending. And as a reminder, there will also be a ceremony today at noon at Winchester Hall that the county will present, and I hope to see you there as well. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.